From the Dominion Post, in Morgantown, West Virginia, this is the Postcast, the audio companion to the Dominion Post newspaper. In this episode, local education boards make preparations to open schools in fall, Monongalia County holds its second grand jury of the year, and Morgantown sees new outbreaks of COVID-19. I'm your host, Chris Schultz, and these are the week's top stories. For many students and educators, July 4th often marks a halfway point in summer break, a time to start anticipating the return to familiar classrooms and hallways. But this year, COVID-19 continues to cast a shadow of uncertainty over everything, making it difficult for educational leaders to create a coherent plan for that return. I'm joined now by Dominion Post reporter Jim Bissett. There are a lot of questions that remain to be answered, and we'll try and get to those in just one moment, but with COVID-19 still very much here, and with the start of school only about 7 weeks away now, can you give us an idea of what the school environment is going to look like this year for students and teachers?
Yeah, right now it's a full-time job for the district, just getting ready for school. And it's sort of it's like a big definite maybe right now, where in the district's world there is definitely going to be a first day of school, which is going to be Thursday, August 20th. The maybe part comes in depending upon, the COVID-19 is still on the land, still upon the land. So the maybe part comes in as to whether or not that'll be able to happen, whether or not you'll be able to have students actually in the building and you have teachers in the building. I mean, there's so many vulnerable populations, especially involving teachers who might be a little bit older, teachers that might have pre-existing conditions, for example. And that's just the teachers. And then you've got, well, how do we manage these students? Mon County, this most recent COVID-affected year that was like no other year, Mon County still finished out with something like 11,000 students. I think the district is on track to have a similar enrollment for this year. And that's 11,000 students put into a pretty uncertain environment, even though there are a lot of solid provisions are in the process of being made. There's still a lot of variables, and there's a lot of that maybe that I talked about going on. No, I can tell you right now, though, the plan for that first day of school, which is Thursday, August 20th, everything's going to be staggered. For example, that August 20th, that Thursday, ideally, you're going to have grades 1, 5, and 8 in school, along with the seniors, and you're going to come out on Friday, August 21st. You're going to have second grade, fourth grade, seventh grade, and 11th grade in school. Going on to Monday, August 24th, and through that week, you're going to introduce kindergarten kids, pre-kindergarten, middle school grades. You're going to take it all the way up to August 31st, which, if you're in a perfect world, or as perfect as it can be in the pandemic, you're going to have every student in every grade and every building on Monday, August 31st.
Well, Jim, that certainly seems, if I'm being perfectly candid, like a far-fetched proposal as of right now, considering the news that we have of outbreaks at gyms, of outbreaks from people traveling to the beaches, at bars, etc. But, these discussions do need to be happening. Does the county have any idea? Do they have a particular number that they're pegging this reopening to? Is there a baseline that they feel comfortable with of percentage of infection? And on the other side, is there a number that they have in mind for when they need to, call for a return to full distance learning?
Well, I know that a lot of those decisions involving those metrics, a lot of those decisions are going to be out of the hands of the local board, because they're going to come down from the state Department of Education. They're going to come down from Governor Jim Justice. I know that the state superintendent of schools, Clayton Birch, I know he's been meeting hourly, by the minute with his staff and with the governor as he's been hashing out these particulars. I know that the local district is doing the same thing. Officials are telling me that this thing can change by the hour or maybe even change by the minute. So the idea is, and there are a lot of particulars that they're still working on as far as the management of student populations, teachers and staffers too, as far as how do we get them in the building every day? And are we going to have a checkpoint? I mean, what do we do? Is everybody going to have a temperature? Are their temperature going to be taken every day?
Right. And Jim, that's something I wanted to ask you about. Is there, at this time, do we have any details about any of those precautions? For example, anything as simple as will masks be required to the more complex planning requirements, like what is the schedule for sanitizing classrooms going to look like?
Right now, the local school boards are rolling this out in sections right now. There's actually a lot of what amounts to a lot of community work involved. They've got parents from the community. They've got people in education. Everybody's assembling together, and they're all working on various particulars of the plan with the understanding that it can change hourly or daily, and with the understanding, too, that this might not happen, depending on those cases. Going back to what you were asking me as far as metrics on baseline cases, I mean, there's a lot that's going to have to be considered there as people worry about surges in coming days or coming weeks. I mean, you look, for example, there was a bar in Michigan where you got 80 positive diagnoses of COVID-19 traced to one bar. You got what we're watching in neighboring Preston County, where some cases reported that just trace back to a vacation trip to Myrtle Beach. I mean, there's a lot of factors that the board has to look at. The state has to look at, but the local board in particular. So that's where everybody is right now. They've got that tentative first week plan, an easing in process with the idea that, we want to get kids back into school. Teachers are grappling with it. They want to be back in front of their classrooms and their kids. But some of our teachers in the county are a little bit older. They might have pre-existing conditions, so they're part of that vulnerable population too.
Right. So still a lot of questions to be answered here. And just as a reminder to our listeners, there are still 7 weeks, almost 2 full months until those questions really need to be decided. But you can also read the reporting on Preston County's preparation by Kathy Plum at DominionPost.com. And Jim, I look forward to reading the rest of your reporting as more plans and more decisions are made on getting our students and our teachers and our staff back into schools. I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, well, Chris, thanks for having me.
'79. That's the number of indictments handed down by Monongalia County's grand jury in June, the second of 3 annual grand juries convened in the county. I'm joined now by Dominion Post Cops and Courts reporter Will Dean. Will, it seems like it was a lifetime ago, but in one of our first episodes of the Postcast, you and I sat down and discussed the first grand jury of the year. We've now arrived to the second of 3 grand juries that Monongalia County holds. Can you remind our listeners what exactly it is that a grand jury does?
Yes, so a grand jury is a group of citizens, and they go down to the courthouse, and the prosecutors present them the cases that they want to prosecute for felonies. And it's bigger than a typical jury for a trial. And they don't have to be unanimous, but it does have to be a majority. And they just say whether there's enough evidence to make it worth prosecuting. It's not the extremely high, beyond reasonable doubt standard of a trial. It's just, yes, this is worth trying to prosecute.
And before we get into the details of the indictments that were handed down, can you tell us, was this delayed or impacted in any fashion by COVID-19?
Yeah, so it was actually 2 months late. Typically, the second grand jury of the year happens in May, and this one happened in mid-June. It's actually a much smaller grand jury as well in terms of the number of indictments that came back. Usually it's over 100, like in the 110 range, and this one was around 80. And that's actually because Prosecutor Perry Christopher said she had to be more selective because not only is this term shorter before the third one happens, but there's still a lot of unresolved cases from the January term that haven't been resolved yet because of COVID.
So, Will, looking through the list of cases that did receive indictments from the grand jury, what stands out to you?
So I think the one that's going to get the most media attention is definitely there's two Fairmont men who are accused of murdering a WVU student back in February. They were both indicted. There were a couple of attempted murders that were indicted. There was an Aaron's Law case that was indicted. Aaron's Law came out of a young woman who was killed in Fairmont, and the driver left the scene of the accident and was never found. And this particular one actually happened in December, and it's something that's fairly regular in Mon County, and it's always tragic because it obviously involves a death. Yeah, I think those are the most interesting ones. The rest are your burglaries, your drug crimes, your domestic violences, things like that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but the next step here is an arraignment for the suspects whose cases were indicted. Have any of those arraignments occurred already?
Yeah, each judge was assigned something in the mid-20s cases from this grand jury, and two of the judges have held their arraignments already. The third judge, Cindy Scott, the newest judge, she was actually just sworn in this week, will be holding hers on Tuesday.
So, Will, where do these cases go from here? What's the next step?
They scatter to the wind. A trial date is set, and then they get resolved over the next week to years. A very, very small number of them will go all the way to trial. Most of them will plead out either to what's charged or to a lesser charge, or maybe some of the charges will get dismissed and they'll plead to some of them. Some of them will get dropped for various reasons. Yeah. After that, they're fully in the justice system.
All right, well, Will, I'm sure you will follow up for us on the cases that do make it to trial or do plead out. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this grand jury as well as all the other work that you do around the courts and our criminal justice system here in Monongalia County. Thanks so much, Will.
Yep. Have a good one.
On the eve of Independence Day, the United States cannot seem to shake the COVID-19 pandemic. Where other countries have succeeded in bringing their cases down to manageable levels, the U.S. is seeing cases surge across the country, and Morgantown is no exception. I'm joined now by Dominion Post business editor Suzanne Elliott. Suzanne, we have a couple of different situations here, outbreaks really, using the term outbreak because it is defined as a scenario where 3 or more people have come out positive with COVID-19, and that is exactly what we have on our hands here, at least in one case, for sure. So let's start with the situation at Planet Fitness that began developing late last week. Suzanne, can you tell us what exactly is the situation at the Morgantown area Planet Fitness and when did it begin?
The health officials are saying that an asymptomatic patron of Planet Fitness went there Wednesday, June 24th, again showing no signs of COVID. And then 2 days later, this person came down with COVID, tested positive. Planet Fitness officials were informed, and the gym was closed for a couple days for a deep cleaning to make sure, equipment is far enough apart that people are safe inside.
So just to confirm, the gym was closed earlier this week, but has now since reopened after a cleaning.
Correct.
So Suzanne, how many people are potentially exposed? I know that in your reporting and in Ben's reporting on this subject, the health department has asked anyone who was at the gym in a certain time frame to contact them. So how many people could potentially be contacting the health department?
205, Chris. There it is, but that's a 6-hour window. Let me say that. They estimate they wanted to go as wide as possible, and they're estimating that 205 people could potentially be affected.
How many of those has the health department already heard from?
As of yesterday afternoon, the health department has heard from about 20 people from Planet Fitness. We don't know if any new cases have resulted from the exposure or not yet.
So that's one situation, but we actually have two, as I mentioned earlier, in Morgantown. The second one you just reported on Thursday morning is tethered to bars in downtown Morgantown. Suzanne, what's the situation there?
Well, coincidentally, on the evening of the 24th, some young people who were not wearing masks went into 3 Morgantown bars, the Back Door, Big Times, and Baby Squirrel's Saloon. They have now tested positive for COVID-19, the health department said.
So this is obviously a more complex situation than Planet Fitness. Planet Fitness has one location. You know more or less how many people came in and out. That's countable. In a situation like this, where you have multiple locations, multiple individuals across a larger area, what is the potential exposure here?
Your guess is as good as mine. It's believed that the exposure took place at Baby Squirrel's Saloon, according to the health department, but these people were also in the other 2 bars, and again, they were not wearing masks. I know the owners of the bars are doing everything the health department's telling them to do so their patrons can be safe. I spoke with the owner of the Big Times, and he mentioned that he is taking temperatures of anybody that comes inside the bar with the contactless thermometer. His staff is masked and doing everything that the health department wants him to do. And he's also had his staff tested.
Well, that's certainly reassuring. But Suzanne, as we continue seemingly without stopping with the reopening of West Virginia, we see Planet Fitness closing for a few days and then opening right back up. It seems like the bars are going to take the same path, obviously under the guidance of the health department. What steps can individuals take to protect themselves and others when they're going out and patronizing these local businesses?
I can't stress the importance of wearing a mask and possibly carrying a bottle of hand sanitizer with you and social distance. I mean, again, COVID's not going away, and we need to take precautions to stop it.
Very wise advice there, Suzanne, and I want to thank you for that advice as well as your coverage on these stories. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about them as these contact tracing and the tests come back. So thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
That's all for this week's episode. The links to all the stories we discuss are also in the description of this episode on your podcasting app. If you haven't already, subscribe to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We would also really appreciate it if you would take the time to rate and review us. Nobody's exactly sure why, but a rate and a review combo really goes a long way to boost the show. Be sure to check out our sports podcast, Best of 7. Andrew and Sean are now putting out new episodes every week. You can also check out our local history podcast, All About History. We want to hear from you. Do you like the show? Do you hate the sound of my voice? Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Let me know. Email podcast@dominionpost.com. Or you can reach out on any of the Dominion Post social media. We're Dominion Post, WV, on Twitter, Dominion Post _WV on Instagram, or go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/. Dominion Post WV. Tweet directly at me if you like. I'm at Schultz Reports on Twitter. That's SCHULZ. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you back here next week. Wash them hands.